Okay, welcome everyone to the second of our discussions about how to be effective listeners. And in our first discussion, we were thinking about the nuts and bolts or the DNA of a sermon. And perhaps the key point there was that when we hear the Bible preached, we're not just hearing the thoughts and opinions of a man who has an opportunity to say what he wants to say, but rather when the Bible passage is opened up and preached, we are hearing God himself address us through his word. And that makes listening to sermons an eternally weighty, serious, happy occasion, doesn't it? Because God is speaking to us. So we need to remember that. Yeah. But we also need to think through, well, okay, given that is true, how can we as a church family and as preachers and as hearers be the best listeners we can be? And that's what we're going to think about. So who wants to kick us off there?
Well, if we're going to listen, it's not an automatic thing. We actually need God to help us. So I think that's one of our problems. We walk into life thinking that we can cope and we can do and stuff. But actually, listening is a spiritual issue, and I need spiritual ears, and I need God to open that up.
Anyone can hear or read the words of the Bible, but that doesn't mean to say that just reading it or hearing it in itself is the means by which you understand it. But you see clearly in the scriptures that the Holy Spirit is the one who opens people's eyes. Because you get people like Richard Dawkins who might be able to quote some scripture to you, but has he understood it? Has he taken it to heart? Has it changed his heart? No, not really. But a Christian will read those same words, and the Spirit will be changing them.
I think that's a really good point, because it is possible, isn't it, to sit under preaching, even faithful preaching, for many years, and yet to remain hard-hearted and unrepentant. And the reason for that, as you say, is because we need the Spirit of Christ to illuminate the word of Christ in our hearts. Otherwise, we're just not going to be able to see the glories of it, or we're not going to be able to believe. And it's interesting if you think about Luke 24, when Jesus is on the road to Emmaus with the disciples. That is what they need in order to understand who Jesus is. So they have this incredible Bible study with Jesus where he goes through the scriptures and points to himself. But what they need is that moment of revelation where the Spirit enables their hearts to burn with conviction and to believe and to see with the eyes of faith. And so that...
I mean, that is interesting, isn't it? Because they were actually physically there, and they were walking with Jesus but didn't recognise him. And when the scriptures were opened up, they recognised him, and then there was that burning heart.
It's such a kindness for us today, because that we sometimes look at the disciples and go, they were with Jesus, so that's why. But actually, their experience in that moment was the same as our experience when we hear the word preached.
And we've got to realise that it is a battle that we're going in, and we do just need God's help here. I mean, the reality is, though, even talking like this can sound all very sort of pious, because often, let's be honest, you wake up in the morning, the kids are playing up a bit, you're trying to get in the car to get to church on a Sunday morning, perhaps, you've had to tell the kids off, perhaps you were stronger than you wanted to be, you've had an argument with your wife and slammed doors, and you rock up to church and you think, why am I even here? And I don't want to be here. I mean, that is a reality, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we kid ourselves, I think, if we think we can come to church as a sort of a blank slate, going, right, I woke up this morning and I'm ready. That no one comes to church like that at all. But the encouraging thing is to say that you don't have to be that pious, angelic saint to come to church for God to do his work in you. In fact, it's the opposite. You're messy, you need to be worked in. And the church and the word and the preaching is where God primarily does that. So if you have slammed doors, and if you have recognised, I probably was a bit strong with that person, great. Come to the place where you can try and fix some of that and reconcile some of that.
Yeah, I think so. And we've all been there, haven't we? I mean, even the fact that we've got to get in our cars and cross town, I mean, that's a minefield, isn't it? Because there's other drivers everywhere. And you're honking them, hoping to the Lord it's not another member of your congregation you've just honked who's about to turn and see you. There's all kinds of things, isn't there? But that's where the spiritual battle is, because we've really got two choices. Either we decide to pull the plug on church and stay home and do something else, or we recognise what the Bible tells us is that we can come as broken sinners to the place of grace and know that it is not the healthy who need a doctor, it's the sick. So being a sick person in the presence of Christ and his word is the best place to be, because he's going to come and he does not break the bruised reed. He doesn't put out the flickering candle. He wants to come and help us with our sin and our failure, and he will do it through his word.
That is really, really important. And I think so many get this wrong. They feel hypocrites. They feel they don't have a feeling at all, and they say, "Oh, I don't think church is, the place I would need to be today. It would be better if I take a break or something like that." That is wrong. That is 100% wrong. And so there is where we need to ask God's grace. Help me come. But it does lead us on to this second point, because these things are sort of all together, aren't they? If we're going to be an effective listener, we have to depend on God, but we need to be active in the sermon as well. It's not a one-man show, is it?
No.
It's not. That's why we found it hard, those of us that preach, just doing it online, because it feels different, because you want a congregation, people to be active in their listening of the sermon, and the preacher tends to adapt towards that. But because this is a spiritual battle, isn't it?
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, that's why the first thing and one of the most helpful things to do before you come to church is not only to pray for yourself, but to pray for the preacher, because we need God's help. If we're going to try to communicate this eternal word faithfully, we need help. But it's not just about, but being faithful is about more than just saying what it says. It's about giving people the best chance of hearing it well, isn't it? That's faithfulness, being engaging. And so we need God's help to do that, because, but as you say, then there are other things that we can do, and God's grace to us doesn't just get deposited on us in some strange way. He often works through the kind of lifestyle habits that we put into place. And there are things that we can do to give ourselves the best chance of hearing, aren't there?
Yeah, definitely. So, Jesus will say, those with ears to hear, let them hear. That means that a group of people, some of those who are willing and want to hear will be the ones who do. And those who just are sort of not very engaged, you won't. And there are lots of things we can do to help with that. So if we genuinely want God to work in our lives, let's try and go to bed early on a Saturday so that we're refreshed and awake on the Sunday morning. Let's make sure we have a good breakfast before we go, so we're not sat there thinking about, I'm hungry, when are we going to finish? God is going to deal with us, but we're also creatures, so let's look after ourselves in a creaturely way, so that we have the best opportunity to respond spiritually.
And it is a spiritual battle. There is a Satan, there is a liar, there is a one that wants to stop us hearing, either by not coming or relying on God's grace to help us listen. I mean, Jesus tells a story, doesn't he, about the word going out with, at the parable of the sower who sows the word. It goes on to different soils, and one of the soils is a hard heart. And what happens is that the bird comes and pecks the seed, which is the word. And the bird is Satan. So Satan is out to take away this word. So if you're going into a battle or a fight, I can't imagine a boxer who's going into a big fight sort of over-indulging in the evening before the fight. If you're going into a spiritual battle, we do need to ask the Lord and prepare ourselves and say, I'm going to hear a word which is against the lies that I've heard this week, and therefore I need to be sharp here.
That's right.
What an amazing sort of endorsement of what preaching is, that Satan would be so adamantly trying to remove it from you. Satan wants you to not hear, which makes you go, well, there must be a reason, there must be something good about me actually listening there.
Yeah, that's right. And I think just lastly, and there are some just very concrete things we can do, aren't we? I mean, you've mentioned the lifestyle habits as creatures, which is so important. But even on the Sunday morning or the Sunday evening, we would probably do well to not use our phones for our Bibles, wouldn't we?
I think so.
As good as it is to have that technology available to us, we can minimise potential distractions by not just putting them on silent, but by pocketing them, basically, and getting a Bible out. Some people, and I think it's a good idea, some people like to make notes, or some people can pay attention by illustrating things and doodling. That's how some people listen. We can come by thinking through, what does the passage says? What does this mean for me? What one thing could I write as a take-home point for my life? There are just little things we can do to give ourselves the best chance, aren't there? So depending on God's grace and also thinking about how we can be the best listeners are two really important points in this quest to become a better hearer.